Good morning. Welcome, everyone. And by everyone, I'm really talking to people on the phone. Thank you for joining us remotely. Looks like we have about 5 people who are on our call with us, which is great. And we have a few people in the room besides the staff, and hopefully we'll get a few more joining us. Not sure if perhaps UEA is the cause for our lower attendance today, but I'll tell you what it means. More cake for me. So this is Mindy Tuller, and we'll go ahead and get started on our usual welcome and introductions. See if I can get to our PowerPoint. There we go. All right. So I am the manager of the Medical Home Portal and facilitate this meeting. I think most of you know who I am. And then I think what we'll go ahead and do is go around the room and introduce ourselves, and then ask the folks on the phone if they can unmute and introduce themselves as well. Dawn, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Dawn Bentley. I'm one of the quality improvement specialists at UPIC.
So I'm Gabi Baragoshi, and I'm the other quality improvement coach at UPIC.
I'm Star Stratford with the Association for Utah Community Health.
Welcome. I'm Tiffany Brinton with Salt Lake County Health Department.
Regina Polomeni with Family Voices. Kay Hayes with the Resources on the Medical Home Portal. Christina, their coordinator from University Pediatrics.
Chuck Garland, Director of the Medical Home Portal.
And Ashley Barney doesn't have a microphone, so she just typed in her intro, and she's the care coordinator at Utah Valley Pediatrics in Payson.
Great. Anyone else on the phone care to introduce themselves? Did Amy type in hers?
Amy Spears is here. I know Amy's at Holiday Pediatrics, care manager.
Great.
Kendra Newton is the pediatric care manager from Memorial Clinic.
Hi, Kendra.
And then we have Melinda.
Melinda Tills from Utah Valley Pediatrics, Timpa.
Hi, Melinda.
Hi, Melinda. We have Beth.
Beth is with Primary Children's Springfield. Okay, great.
Okay. And then
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute myself.
You did it. Great. Anyone else on the phone?
I think that's it.
Okay. And Tricia, thank you for joining us this morning. Tell us who you're with.
Willow Creek.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, Tricia.
wonderful.
All right. Well, we will go ahead and get started. So just a clarification from last meeting. Gina was telling us last meeting about a resource that is in Primary Children's for families, and it's a really great resource, but I think we called it the wrong thing, so we just wanted to make sure people were aware of it, and we'll make sure that this link is in our Resources of the Month email that goes out. So it's actually called the Ronald McDonald Family Room, and it sounds fantastic, so it's a great thing to be aware of. It's a facility that provides a place for families to stay right near where their children are, and it includes seating areas, private showers, a stocked kitchen and dining area, a laundry room, computers, and then rooms for overnight sleeping and daytime naps. So that's a tremendous thing for families. Yeah.
Mindy, I'll also add that it's a great service opportunity for families and groups in the community. They have schedules to serve dinner.
Fabulous. Okay. Good to know. Wonderful.
So why was it called the Forever Young Zone before, mistakenly?
The Forever Young Zone is right there.
Oh, okay.
It's something that, Steve Young built for the kids. So it's all in that same area.
Same area, 3rd floor. Okay, great. Okay. And then wanted to let you know that we updated our shared member directory. Thank you to everyone who, we sent the policy information to, and they responded, and so we've added, all those new folks who did that, and then sent out the link again to anyone who, over the whole period of time has opted into that. If this doesn't sound familiar to you, and you don't know what the heck we're talking about, please, let us know. You can get in touch with either Kay or myself, by email, and we can send out again the questions that just have to do with you being willing to share your contact information with this group. So we just need to make sure you opt in. And once you've done that, we will send you the link to this Google directory where all of the information is kept, and we're trying to keep it updated. Also, for those of you in this room, we have those forms if for any reason you haven't done that by email already, so you could do that today. And then we hope that that directory is useful to folks, that you feel confident that you can get in touch with a single individual rather than, for instance, sending a message to the entire listserv and feeling like everyone's seeing it when you didn't want that. Okay, and also I wanted to let you know that we have a couple of updates, and I should have put the link to the Rett syndrome page in here. I mentioned it last time that module was getting an overhaul, and in fact it has been completely updated, so we're pleased about that. I think Rett Syndrome Awareness Month was last month, so that was, we were pleased to get that done. We've also had an updated issue page, a pretty complete update to a page about sleep disorders in children with autism. So I'll make sure that these two links are included in our resources of the month email. And then we've been working on the care coordination pages, and in fact, I think they're about ready to turn on. And so we'll point you to those as well. So those are just sort of pages that have general information about building a medical home and how care coordination can be a part of that and be integrated into that. And so hopefully we've improved those a little bit, and we'll make sure that you're aware of where those can be found. And then we wanted to make sure that people are aware of this date, Friday, March 23rd. So that's going to be our spring learning session next spring, and we'll do it again on the University of Utah campus in the Officers Club. Gina, you have a funny look on your face.
No,
okay.
I have no eyelash in my
Okay, all right. Sorry. I was really worried for a second that Gina was telling me that's a terrible date. No.
Sorry.
Just an eyelash, people. All right. So hopefully this is a good date. It's the date that we're going forward with for now. If we hear a lot of concerns about that, of course, we can rethink it. But that's a date where we have access to the Officers Club, and it is the university's spring break, meaning that there won't be traffic, or at least nearly the amount of normal traffic, which I think makes it a lot easier for people to get up there. And we've had 2 good learning sessions at that location utilizing the university's breaks before, and that's what we're trying to do again. So hopefully that'll work. More information about that learning session will be going out again in the resources of the month email. Okay, so this is our meeting time where we can let you guys talk about anything that's going on in your practice, any difficult cases, any new resources that you've identified, anything at all that you'd like to share with the group and maybe get some help with, do a little crowdsourcing, or just even, brag about a little bit. So does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up at this time?
Let me do a quick housekeeping thing.
Yeah.
Sorry. We do have new tenants at this end of the building over here, Allied with Families. So if you have to go out and take a phone call, kind of go where you kind of come in and then try to go to the bathroom this way versus going out these doors. It's not to disrupt as much, least as possible.
Okay. Good to know. Okay. So yeah, Gina's saying that where you enter by the elevators is a place that you can take calls, and also to head directly south to the bathrooms versus going kind of to the north behind the meeting room, and that's where new tenants are. Okay. Well, those are great tenants to have located nearby. That's fantastic. Allies with Families. Great. Okay. And then while we're kind of talking about this building sorts of things, how was parking for folks today? Everything was fine?
So I didn't take a card because it was open, so I hope they're gonna hold me hostage.
We keep getting, well, never know, you might have to spend the day with me.
Oh, no.
We keep getting a little bit of different information, but we'll just get to voucher
Okay.
with the card. And I think they're going back and forth because they're resurfacing and all of that, so they've been a little bit offish on what they're doing at the
Okay.
gate.
So don't forget to get the voucher before you leave today.
Or,
Yeah,
yeah,
otherwise you have to
yeah.
pay.
Yes, right, okay, great.
Okay, so that gave y'all a couple of minutes to think of your cases that you want to share, so bring them on. Anybody want to talk a little bit about some barriers they're facing to help the families? If I can get out to the portal, here we go. Anyone? Okay, how about any quality improvement wins? Okay. Trying to think of what else I could,
Any follow-up on old cases from last month? Any
or previous months?
previous months?
Good point. Does anybody have, well, I'm not sure if we've got folks in here who talked about it last time.
Last month. I forgot what was it.
That's a good point. We could look at those ahead of time and then mention those again. Well, all right, guys. Feel free to raise your hand if you think of something. But yeah, as far as new resources, we'll just make sure that the things that we talked about in the previous couple of slides go on our resources list.
Is anybody doing a quality improvement project at the moment? Like Utah Valley Pediatrics or even Willow Creek Pediatrics? Do you guys do any PR projects? Quality improvement projects? Nothing new?
Nope. All right, well, that just means more time to talk about the asthma resources and asthma programs. So we'll go ahead and turn this time over to, I assume we're going in the order that's listed here, so we'll start with Brittany.
Kind of follow in order.
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually brought a clicker, I just walked in late and didn't want to
Okay.
adoption.
I have no idea if that'll connect and work, but please by all means.
We can try.
Okay, try. And then, if you want, I can sit over here and press the button if that helps, and then you can not be tied to the.
I'm always happy when that actually works. So thank you for this opportunity to come speak to you. I think Brett really knows what we're
And
going to
then we have
talk
some
about.
on the line too.
Oh, and people on the line.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so as a matter of fact, be sure to speak up.
I'll speak into this microphone right here. So my name is Brittany Guerra. I'm with the Utah Department of Health Asthma Program. And these three ladies and I are going to talk a little bit about some asthma resources in the state of Utah. If you were here at the October meeting, you've heard of a lot of these, but we have a couple other options to talk through with you today. So feel free to ask questions or comments or talk pretty candidly through this. It's not that formal. Even though I have a clicker, it's not that formal of a presentation. So yeah, so I'll start off just talking about the Utah Asthma Program. We're funded 100% by the CDC, so our main focus is really trying to promote comprehensive asthma care, which has a definition that I can share with you if you're really interested. But basically, it's trying to help providers and schools and community members have options towards full asthma services as outlined by national guidelines. And then we also try to promote public health and healthcare collaboration, which has really done a lot through the UPIC project. So if you've ever participated in their projects in the past, that's a big way in which we try to build those relationships. So as part of this process, we offer some very specific resources to clinics. So I'll talk about the first three and then turn over the time for the last two. But the first option that we have, And actually, I think this is a radio.
Oh,
You know what, I think they're not able to see it.
Oh,
Oh.
I may not have done something that I needed to do, like share my screen. All right, feel free to keep talking, I'll just.
Yeah. So one of the things that we offer is a free asthma webinar series. We only do it 3 times a year, but it's an opportunity to get free CE credit. So we offer this for nurses and respiratory therapists. And then if anyone in any of your clinics is a certified asthma educator, there's also options to get some CE credit for those webinars through that. And so we advertise through a listserv, we advertise on our website, and actually Mindy helps me every time to send it through you. So feel free to take advantage of that. And if you'd like, we also have recordings of past webinars. So if you just really want to get some continuing asthma education on your own free time, not for CE credit, but for the benefit of everyone, you can also just go look through those, and those are on our website. So that's the asthma webinar series. The second resource is prescription assistance resources and programs. A big barrier that you probably encountered with some of your patients is the cost of medications, particularly with asthma. And so this is a little flyer that I actually printed out, and you're welcome to take as many as you want, or come to our website. We have all of these links on our website as well. But depending on income of the family and certain other criteria, you're able to help them access some free medications, or at least discounted medications. So those are a list of some of the websites that are also on our website. And then the Community Health Worker Asthma Training Module, UPIC Learning Collaborative, and Utah Asthma Home Visiting Program we'll take a little bit more time to talk about. So, you know, I always feel so fancy with this.
I may have
Oh,
interrupted it somehow.
Oh, no, that's fine. Well, anyway.
So much for the
So much for the clicker. So much for the clicker.
Hang up?
If you click, you have to click back on that.
It might be working now.
Good thing you're here. You're stuck on that slide for the next hour. So this is pretty small to look at, but I just wanted to show you the flyer we put together. For the last 2 years, we've been offering an asthma community health worker module training. Are any of you familiar with community health workers or have that type of staff in your clinic? Kind of some no and yeses. So really, one of the efforts in the state is to try to build this workforce and make it more accessible and used in the clinics, but also in your communities and they talk about jail rehabilitation using community health workers, really anywhere where someone from the community can help across barriers that experience being foreign or having other disparities or issues in their lives. That's what a community health worker can really speak to. So we put together a 16-hour training going over asthma basics. It's in person, it's interactive, and this last time we also tied in specific training to offer our home visiting program, which you'll learn about a little later. And this is a good training. We've had very good evaluation results from it, and it's open to any staff who would be interested. So this could fit for MAs or even care coordinators if you feel like you would like to work more in asthma care. If you notice that your patient population has a high burden of asthma and want additional education, this is one option. It's free. It's at this time definitely free. We just cover it with our grant. And there are other options too that are less time intensive. So we'll talk about those as well. But this is one of the options. And if you ever do have staff that you want to dedicate more towards asthma education in your clinic, this could be a great option for them. So keep that in mind.
The focus of the training is on training people in the clinics to provide asthma education to patients.
So it's actually not specific to a setting. The purpose of this training was to use local asthma experts to educate on asthma basics. That would include things that you would teach in asthma self-management education or things that you could teach in a clinic, but it could be any setting. You can see some of the topics. So the first one was asthma burden and motivational interviewing, so practicing the skill set of motivational interviewing in the context of asthma. interactions. And then we do that first so you can apply it throughout all 6 sessions. So the second one, we talked about asthma basics and tobacco. And we have a tobacco expert come in and talk about tobacco quit lines and how it relates to asthma. And then the third session is triggers in the home and the work in the school, how to identify and how to, and then different resources to remediate them, or things that you can do with the patient to help them set goals and remediate triggers. The fourth one is on medication and devices, which is a really popular one. So reviewing all of the quick relief and controller medications, why, physiologically what's happening, why you want to encourage your patient to follow what the physician has them do, which is typically, I mean, it depends on the patient, but they might have a controller and a quick relief. So talking through why it matters to have both, even though it's cost prohibitive sometimes with prescription costs. And then assessing and monitoring is the last session that's part of that core asthma basics. And then that last session 6 was our asthma home visiting program, optional session, which again, Tiffany will tell you all about that. But yeah, I think next year we'll probably reorganize it a little differently yet again. We keep changing it to try to make it better. But yeah, so it covers those topics. Any other questions about anything I've shared so far?
So when people register for this, are they registering and committing to all of the classes, or can they pick and choose and just come to the medication and devices if they want to?
That's a really good question. In order to get the certificate of completion, we do want, if you're going to register, and because it's free and we're using these resources, we want you to come to at least session 1 through 5, but we're going to reorganize it next year. So session 6 is optional, I think that's a bigger part of all the sessions and try to streamline things a little bit more. So at this time, at 16 hours, it might go down from there. It's based off of Massachusetts community health worker and asthma training, so but yeah, that's a good question. I think we would be open though, if one of you just wanted to attend one of them, but not formally attend the training to come and say, I think that'd be fine. Our purpose is to try to get information out, so. Good question, thank you. Great, well, I'll turn the time over to Gabby, and she'll go into detail about one of the other resources we offer that you're probably all very aware of.
Is it, which button?
It's the one on the side. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, hi, so my name is Gary Baragoshi, and I am one of the 2 QI coaches, or quality improvement coaches at UPIC. And some of you have probably heard about UPIC, and some of you actually worked on quality improvement projects with us. But for the ones who have not heard about UPIC, well, let me quickly tell who we are and what we do. So UPIC stands for Utah Pediatric Partnership to Improve Healthcare Quality. It's quite a mouthful, and it took me about 6 months to learn that little sentence when I started UPIC. So we are promoting evidence-based best practices and assisting clinicians in implementing quality improvement at the practice levels. And how do we do that? By providing education, tools, resources, performance measurements, and ongoing support to the clinicians, to the practices, and helping them to bridge the gap between knowing best practice and actually implementing it in practice. Okay. So as Brittany mentioned, so UPIC has partnered with the asthma program from the health department, and we started a learning collaborative, an asthma learning collaborative, early this year. So usually our learning collaboratives are 9 months long, and early this year we sent out these flyers to several practices, actually to quite a few practices throughout Utah, and invited them to participate in that learning collaborative. By April, we had about 11 practices signed up, and what we offer to these practices is a monthly educational asthma webinar and monthly team lead calls where we expect or actually request that at least one person per clinic has to call in to this team lead call, because we are talking about the performance measures, how well the practices are doing, and as a group, we brainstorm ideas on how to overcome some of the barriers. And it's always easier to do it in a group than every practice does it on your own. And so it's our little PDSA cycles we are talking about, and in the practice, go ahead and implement some of the change ideas for the next month. Just to show you what variety of practices actually participating this year. So we have federal qualified health centers like Utah Partners for Health, Mountain Land, the Neighborhood Clinic. Then we have pediatric practices who are part of the big organizations like University or Intermountain or even Utah Valley Pediatrics. You guys are pretty much spread out throughout the valley. At this time, Spanish Fork is participating. And then we have a clinic, the Marie Free Clinic, which is purely run on volunteer staff, and the funding comes 100% from donations. So they are facing different barriers than, let's say, the Intermountain Clinic, right? So because they don't get reimbursed from insurance companies, so implementing the correct ICD-10 code use is kind of hard because there's no incentive for them to use the right code as it would be for Intermountain, who is relying on the money to get it back from the insurance company. And then also we have, have practices in Ogden and also down in Blanding, the Utah Navajo Health System, they are also participating. So it's quite a variety. So here's a list of some of the ASLA webinars we already offered this year. And I would like to point out that some of those ASLA webinars, they are all recorded. They are done by pulmonologists at primary children's hospital, like Dr. Tafi, Dr. Hutchinson, Dr. Lake, and Dr. Tan. And they're all very educational, very informative. Well, it's a quality improvement project, right? And every quality improvement project gotta have some measures. So how else do you know how you improve? So in the ASLA project, we have a total of six measures. 4 of those measures are core measures. That means every practice has to do them, and then 2 are optional. So the 4 core measures are the severity documentation, control documentation by using a standardized tool, then inhaled corticosteroids for persistent asthma patients, and the asthma action plan. The optional measures we have are the flu vaccine. If the asthma patient receives a flu vaccine within the past 12 months, and did the provider or the MA or the care coordinator or care manager assess if the patient knows how to use the inhaler device correctly? Because we have heard stories that they are using them totally inappropriately. So here is a couple of data, quality improvement, always goes with data. How this is an aggregate report on how the practices are performing. As you can see, some of the measures we have done quite a good job, and some of them we still have to work a little bit more on them. So the red line would be the goal line. That's by December. That's when the project is over. We hope that the practices have reached at least the goal line. So as an action plan, it's always a struggle, and maybe you can give me some ideas how your practice does it, because we still run into a lot of barriers at the practice level. However, we have done a nice improvement at the baseline when we started out. So in aggregate data, we got 13%. We are up now to already to 50%. So we're doing much better. Flu shot. So here we ask the practices to look to the chart reviews and look if the patient, the asthma patient, received a flu shot within the last or the past 12 months. And so in August, for this year, there was no flu shot season has not started yet. So basically, this is the data from last year, from last year's flu shot season. And the practices were actually pretty surprised that they are performing lower than they thought. So only about 40% of the asthma patients actually have documented that they received their flu shot. Our last team call about 2 weeks ago, that was our topic. You know, we kind of brainstormed around on some ideas on how to remind them that they need to get the flu shot, or how the provider should ask the patient or the MA. Hopefully you're going to see an improvement coming months. Any questions about the data?
That's why I think it's interesting that, one, that there's been a significant improvement in the control documentation, especially compared to the severity documentation, which is kind of required now with ICD-10. So that's sort of incorporated in the coding for the diagnosis, where the control is not. But that's remarkable.
It is, especially, so there's two measures we have on the control documentation. So in the past, on all the UPIC asthma project, when we ask the practices, you gotta document control. How you do it, it's up to you. You can use a standardized tool like the ACT test, or you can do your own provider or clinician assessment and just write it in. Well, for this project, we asked them, you have to use a standardized tool. Like, I brought a couple of them with me, like the ACT. And so this is harder to do because you have to implement this or you train the MA or the front staff to hand this out to the patients before they see the provider. So it's different ways how do you do it. If we just look, regardless if the tool was used or not, we are much higher. So yes, we have done. And that's a very, you're right. The ICD-10 code makes it much easier. But on this one, we are also asking, just putting the code down does not count. You have to address it in your visit. So just attaching it to a visit is not enough. You have to address it in a visit. So, yeah. And the asthma action plan. The asthma action plan, you know, it is really, it is a difficult thing to do. And I don't know how you guys do the asthma action plan at the Willow Creek Clinic. How do you do it?
The med home will go in and do the PFT test that the kids and the doctor review reports. And we have like a packet that we'll give the parents.
So already an asthma packet ready for the parents to give. Oh, that's a good idea.
And it goes over, I mean, we explain how to use the inhalers, the spacers.
Very good.
We demonstrate that for them, and then we give them a packet to take home, and it goes over everything we discussed in the visit, and also all the instructions on how to use their inhaler and how to use it.
That's very good. Yeah. Anybody online who want to share how they do the asthma action plan, or how they, if they have packages in their clinic? Or not?
Nothing yet, but I will say what Jade Porter joined a little bit late, and she said that she can hear better through the computer than the phone for the audio. So people online, if it's kind of quiet or muffled, try the computer instead of the phone call.
Okay, that's a good input. Yeah. No. Not always. All right. Well, the asthma registry. So what we also offer, another tool to the practices we're participating, is an asthma registry in an Excel format. And this registry can be used for any other chronic conditions too, like ADHD or whatever your heart desires, you can use it for. But for this project, we created the asthma registry. It would make it easier for the practice to keep track of the asthma population. So in an asthma registry, so you need a designated person in the practice to actually run the registry, right? You have to enter the data. And it can be the care coordinator, it can be the care manager, it can be a designated asthma MA, medical assistant, or in one of our practices, actually the provider took it on, and she said, no, I will take care of that one, it's my responsibility. So anybody in the practice actually can do it. Just, it has to be a designated task for them to do it. And so, and why should we do it? Well, it keeps you, it tells you what percentage of your patients are actually persistent asthma patients or versus intermittent asthma patients. Or it tells you what percentage of your asthma population is well controlled versus not well controlled. It also helps you with the follow-up visits to see when is the follow-up visit, when should it be scheduled, is it scheduled, yes, no. If it's not scheduled, you need to reach out to the patient and remind them, please schedule a follow-up visit, we need to see you, we need to make sure the medication is working. Or you also can use it, you can use it to track referrals. If your practice or your provider refers a patient to a pulmonologist or an allergist, you can keep track on that in the asthma registry, like the date of referral. Make sure that the care coordinator, whoever, care manager at the practice level, reaches out to the patients again or the family and says, hey, are you able to schedule a visit at the pulmonologist? Yes, no, do you need help? Or if you have one scheduled, when is the date? You can keep track of the date of the specialist appointment, and then every 2 weeks or even once a month, it will remind you to look for the report of the specialist. If you don't, it's very easy, the kid actually can fall through the cracks, and that's what we don't want. Another thing you can do is you can keep track of resources you refer the patient to. One of those resources is the asthma home visiting program, and this is actually my cue to hand it over to Tiffany, who runs the program, and she will give you a good overview of that one. But before I do that, any questions regarding the quality improvement asthma project? We're going to start another one next year, so if you're interested in participating or you want to bring it back to your practice, need more information, you can either contact Mindy or me, or bring it up next meeting. We are here for you.
All right, thanks, Gabby. So like she said, my name is Tiffany Brinton. I work at Salt Lake County Health Department, and I am the one who implements the asthma home visiting program for Salt Lake County. I know we have a lot of people in here who have actually referred to our program. I know I've worked with Allison and also with Willow Creek Pediatrics in the past, so it might be a little bit of a repeat, but hopefully we'll reach some new folks and let them know about this resource. So for our program, this is just kind of a brief overview about what our format looks like. To our participants' homes 3 times, and then we conduct 2 follow-ups. The follow-up call we do 1 6 months after they complete out, and we're collecting lots of data on them, progressing, and is at our first 2 visits, and then our 3rd visit and our remaining calls are where we do a lot of our data validation, but everything we know in the process to make sure that they're sustaining those efforts that we've taught them. So I'll go in a little more detail to visits 1 and 2, but this is kind of the overview of what we do. So our first visit is just some basic asthma education. Behind properly, we'll actually assess them on their inhaler technique to make sure that it's correct. We'll also talk through their asthma action plan if they have one and make sure that they understand it, and also if they don't have one, we'll definitely encourage them to talk to their provider about getting one, just as a way to have an emergency plan in place. Usually our first visit is where the families really love the first visit because there's a lot of things about asthma that are complicated and complex, and we're really able to clear up a lot of those things in this first visit. Our second visit is all about triggers, and so at this visit we educate them about what different triggers are, and then we actually do an in-home walkthrough with them to help them identify different problem areas that they might be dealing with. So all of the main triggers in the home kind of follow this format where we talk about what they are, where you can find them, and then what you can do about them. And really our goal with this is to help teach the participants to do this for themselves. It's not very useful for us to go in and be like, oh, okay, in this room you've got carpet, that's a problem, you've got mold, that's a problem. But sure, that might be a good quick fix, but we want them to be able to do this if they move, if they switch apartments, if something comes up. And so we really try and teach them and then let them lead the walkthrough. So when we do our assessment, they've got a paper that they're looking at, and I have a different, more in-depth paper that I'm looking at. But I try and let them direct that conversation. So usually when I get there and we go start the walkthrough, we'll get into a room and I'll say, okay, based on what we talked about, what asthma triggers do you see in here? And let them kind of guide the discussion. Yeah, Gabby.
So skills in motivational interviewing would be very welcomed.
Definitely. Yeah, motivational interviewing is
The key.
to having this be successful, because you might walk into a room that is absolutely filthy, full of asthma triggers, and they're like, I don't really know, I don't see anything. And you're like, okay, let's guide them.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, motivational interviewing really is key to that. And it also just helps empower the participant. And this is kind of an invasive visit. I mean, we're already in their homes, and then to go around telling people that their house is dirty and that kind of stuff, it can be threatening and not very comfortable, and so this makes it a little bit more comfortable for the participant as well. One thing we do at all of our visits is we set goals with the participants to help them find specific things to work on. So, for example, at visit 2, that's another good thing that can kind of help with that motivational interviewing up front. Say, we're going to set some goals on triggers specifically at the end. So as we're doing the walkthrough, I want you to be thinking about things that you can improve on. And that can kind of help get people in that right frame of mind. So these are some of the referral channels that we've had. We get referrals from a variety of sources. Many of them are clinical. Our probably biggest referral source is Primary Children's ER. They send us a list weekly, which is really awesome just because we're really targeting the people who need it the most. We also have a large variety of community organizations like WIC, our local tobacco coalition, that kind of thing. So we're really trying to target a variety of sources. So kind of how this works in a clinic and how it would apply to you guys. So we really like working with clinical settings best just because we're able to kind of be an extension of what you guys do. So you guys see people in the clinic, and you're limited in your scope, in the time you can spend with people, in that kind of thing. You've got so many other demands on you. Where we can go out to their homes and spend 2 hours with a family, and that's not a problem. So clinics are our favorite people to work with because once we go out and see them, we can send you guys information back on them. So this is kind of what our process typically looks like when we work with a clinic. So I'll usually contact a clinic or go with Gabby and contact them together. And we'll kind of develop what that referral criteria or process looks like. So typically, because we're limited in our staffing, we're looking for the most severe cases. So the eligibility for our program are people who have been to the hospital in the last year, been to the ED, oral steroid in the last year, or have an asthma control test less than 19, which indicates poorly controlled asthma. So people with poorly controlled asthma, that's our target population. And then we kind of let the clinic decide how they want to identify those people. Some people use an asthma registry, kind of like what Gabby talked about. Other people, it's more innate in their setting, like their Primary Children's ER. Everyone they see is obviously coming to the ER, so they qualify. It's a little bit more streamlined that way. But we let the clinics decide how that's going to work and how it's going to fit into their process flow. And then once they identify those people, they send those people to me. We can do it either fax, email. I've actually got some forms up here that kind of describe the process more in detail of how you would send a referral to me, and also some sample fax forms of the information that I would need from you guys. So once we get your families, I contact them and go out and see them if I can get a hold of them and if they agree. They don't always agree. Sometimes we really battle trying to get a hold of them. And then they go through the program, which is great. At the end, I compile a report, and then I send it back to the clinic. So some examples of things that I'll include is I'll usually let them know what their asthma control test score was before and after the program. I'll also make notes in there of things that I think it would be good for a clinician to follow up with. So for example, if we're in there and they're not on a controller medication and they're really out of control, I'll probably put a note in there and say, they might need a controller medication. Can you follow up with them on this? Or we've talked about inhaler technique. They can't seem to get it right. Please reinforce this with them. Something else like that, just to kind of make sure that the clinic is on the same side and able to reinforce some of the things that we talk about.
How often, sorry.
Yeah.
How often do you? Where's the benefit now?
Question. So, and it's different versus clinic versus hospital. So, for example, with primary, I would say about half, if it's like 75 to 80% agree. Just because you guys are in a little bit more intimate setting, and they're also not in crisis mode. In a hospital, you're like, yeah, I'll do anything. This is scary. And so people agree to things, and then they don't end up following it up.
They're only sending it to people who said that they would be interested.
Yes, definitely. But clinical settings, I tend to have much better success. Good question. Yeah, Brittany.
How long is the report?
It depends. This has changed over time. Usually if a clinic is kind of a consistent partner, I'll meet with you and decide what's going to be most useful for you. If you really care about spacers, I'll ask them if they have spacer or whatever. But my kind of standard typical report can be anywhere between 1 to 3 pages, depending on how much we talk about, how much information I'm able to gather, how much follow-up I think is needed. I usually include a highlight section at the top with the most important information and then have more detailed below, because I know you guys are all busy and sometimes don't care to read a really, really long report. Yeah, Gabby.
So you're only getting the names of family who agree to be contacted by you. It's the form of consent form, right?
Yes.
That's why you only get the agree.
Yeah, because of privacy reasons, we need to have the families agree to have their information released. Some clinics do this verbally, some clinics do this written. It really just depends on the clinic and kind of what their privacy practices are. But yeah, all participants have to consent to have their information released. Good questions. Yeah, Dot.
And did you say the report comes after the completion of all 3 visits or after each visit?
It's typically done after all 3 visits. Some clinics have requested to have that sent after each visit, which of course that's what we'll do. If the participant does not agree or I can't get a hold of them, I would send them a report back at that point, just saying, I've been trying for 3 months, I can't get a hold of them, I'm officially dropping them because this isn't going anywhere. Yeah.
But if there's something comes up during a visit, like totally uncontrolled because they don't use the inhaler correctly, you wouldn't wait until the 3rd visit. You would immediately let the practice know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and especially if they say like, oh, I have a doctor's appointment next week, then I'll send them a report and be like, this is what we talked about. You might want to reinforce this with them or follow up with them on this. I know they said they're going to ask you about it, but just to be sure, yeah, definitely. Good questions. Anything else before I move on? Yeah, Brittany.
Do you have a Spanish option?
Yes, we do. We are able to offer the program in Spanish. I have a assistant that comes with me, and she's our Spanish speaker. And something I also did mention, this is a free program, so it doesn't cost anything. The families don't need to have insurance or anything like that. We see a lot of undocumented families, to be honest, bringing up the Spanish component. Perfect. I want to share with you some of the outcomes that we've seen. So we've been implementing this program for about 2 years now. So it's been really exciting because we have our 1-year follow-up data on our first-year participants, which is really promising so far. So I'll just read some of these statistics for you. So as far as asthma control, before starting the program, only 19% of participants had controlled asthma, and this increased to 69% after the program. So pretty significant jump. As far as their confidence managing their asthma, that also increased. Starting out, only about 15% felt confident, and that jumped to 85%, which that almost speaks larger to me than asthma control, just because the self-efficacy people have is really going to enable them to sustain this and keep the momentum going. So some of the 1-year follow-up data that we've seen, we're looking more at emergency department visits, hospitalizations, oral steroid use, and we've seen a decrease among all of those areas. So for ED visits, 12 months prior to visit 1, we had 15 total visits across 8 participants, and that dropped to 7 visits among 3, which is pretty good. So those 5 people that didn't go to the ER at all out of those 8 who historically had gone to the ER. Hospitalizations also dropped. So we had 9 hospitalizations in the year prior to going through the program, and that dropped to 1. And then our oral steroids also dropped as well from 36 doses to 17. So our results are really promising. Our first year we didn't have tons of participants. Our year 2 we had a lot. And so it'll be really exciting to kind of see if that data has been carried over into 2018. Yeah, start. For sure.
Not even prompted, I'm just super curious.
I'm not
I just started thinking, I'm totally kidding. How many of the participants are newly diagnosed? Do you know that versus, you know, just uncontrolled over a period of time?
Yes, that's a really good question. I would say most of them are not newly diagnosed.
Okay.
Specifically, I see a lot of kids just because Primary Children send us so many referrals, so there are a lot of like young babies, like I would say less than 3 that we see. And so that's kind of a new diagnosis, but a lot of the people we've had asthma our whole lives, we've struggled with it, we've never been able to figure it out. So you kind of see everything. I know my counterpart, Andrea, in Utah County, she sees a lot of older adults, and it's something they've had their whole life. Good question. 2016, I think it was about 50. What?
I adopted the.
Yeah, 50. 2017, between Andrea and I, we've seen over 100. So we've
Quite a bit for one person, one and a
Yes.
half person
Yes.
program. Yeah.
We've been really busy. But it's good.
It's good. Okay.
We'd rather be out there in the community helping these people, because if not, we're just sitting in our offices like, okay, what are we going to do today? So yeah, please send us your people. These are just some testimonials from our participants. I'm going to read this bottom one. So it says, it used to be a way of life for our daughter to get sick, but after getting educated on her inhalers and having our home inspected, things changed. In 7 months of school, she missed a whopping 27 days of first grade. After the asthma visits and implementing what we learned, she missed only 2 more days of school related to completely unrelated health issues. We are happier, plans happen, dates occur, friends play, life is different. Which, it really shows the impact that this has on the families. Yes, the numbers look really good, but the anecdotal evidence from the families, I think, speaks even more. So this program is offered right now just in Salt Lake and Utah County. My counterpart, Andrea Jensen, that's her phone number. If you ever want to reach out to her, phone number is below. I also have some more detailed instructions on how to send a referral to me. It has phone number, fax number, encrypted email line that you can send things through as well. So I'll leave these for you. And I just want to kind of talk about the future of this program a little bit too. So we are looking at expansion, and we're looking at that through a couple different avenues. One that we've been working closely with the state on is getting this covered through Medicaid, so having reimbursement through the payers, and that's in progress. It's a slow process, but it is something we're actively pursuing. And then another thing that we've been pursuing is using community health workers to implement this program as well. And Star and her group have actually been kind of piloting this, and I'm going to let her talk about that more in detail.
Thank you.
I just used the clicker, which is really important this morning.
So I'm Star Strafford, and I work at the Association for Utah Community Health. So we are the Primary Care Association for Utah, which is always a mouthful to figure out. But basically, we're a membership association for the federally qualified health centers in Utah. So a lot of the health centers have been involved in. You've already seen their logos up here that Gabby's been working with on quality improvement. Let me use the clicker to get to the next screen. So Ouch right now has a community health worker project, which is what I run and which is how I got involved in this. So we have community health workers that are placed at different locations here in Salt Lake at different health centers, addressing social determinants of health and also helping patients set health goals. So primarily patients with chronic illness set health goals and become more engaged in their own health so that they can be more empowered to take care of themselves. So I got involved with these guys because our community health workers already do home visits for patients, primarily to address these referral systems or referrals to social needs and things like that. And so we said, well, what if we could take this asthma home visiting program, teach it to the community health workers, and then they could implement this project within the health center. So instead of having to reach out to the local health department, who now is getting lots of these referrals, we could do it sort of in-house at the community health centers. And so we have community health centers that were, I think we had like 8 that went to the training, I think. 8 community health workers that went to the training, and they were primarily at these 3 clinics and have been working so in combination with Gabby and UPIC, doing the quality improvement aspect through the clinic, through the providers, so that they're working on better control, better documentation, essentially, of control. And then having the community health workers as a resource to help provide better education for the patients and also do the home visiting program. So they got trained, went through Brittany's coordinated training that you heard about earlier, geared for community health workers, or really anyone at the clinic who could be the identified person. So they went through that training, worked with Gabby, and now we've sort of adapted that. I think some of the barriers that we've found, I think this is a great model. And if you have the resources at your clinic to be able to train someone in-house, that's a great way to do it. And if you have the ability to send someone out, especially to do those home visits. But we've been learning even more about doing, adapting it to just do this as an educational model within your clinic and not having to send people out into the community. So maybe I'll just talk about that really quick.
Yeah.
So some of the community health workers have actually found that some of the patients are a little bit hesitant about having them come to their house. And I think people maybe are a little bit private or for a variety of reasons feel like it's a little bit of a barrier, like, I'm not sure that I want someone coming to my house. So they've actually been meeting with them in the clinic. And so we've looked at sort of adapting that home visiting model to still do the education piece, but try to do at least the first visit in the clinic and then get out to their home on the second visit if we can, or at least give them the education about triggers and help them sort of do a visual walkthrough of their home so that they can think through those triggers and empower them to do that on their own. So that's where we are. I think some of the barriers that we've faced so far are just integrating it into clinics. And if you come from clinics, you know that providers have lots of competing demands that are pulling them all over the place. And so asthma may not be the, primary focus of every provider in your clinic, but sort of finding a clinic champion who can help sort of spearhead this among the providers has really kind of helped with that, and then reinforcing that at provider meetings. Don't forget we have the community health workers, figuring out a way to establish them sort of in that workflow so that whenever someone comes in, either with, just with any sort of asthma diagnosis, that they consider the community health worker and an education component, integrated into that visit. And I think that's a great, yes, Kathy.
Have you run into some red tape at the clinics that they don't want to use the community health workers or sending them out to home visits? They're not quite sure how to use them. They're afraid of lawsuits, whatever.
Yes, I would say it depends on the clinic, and because we have community health workers at several different clinics, they're all independent organizations. So we say they're members of the Association for Utah Community Health. These are all totally different clinics and organizations and different structures and different legal concerns. Different people have different and different relationships with the community health workers because the community health workers are different at every site. And so I think some of them, they feel a little more comfortable, and I think some of them, you're absolutely right. There is some reticence to like, oh, wait, I'm not sure that we want to, that I think sometimes some of that control is hard for providers to give up to, that someone else might be able to do that education in addition to them. And so I think that's part of that education piece, is figuring out how to work and encourage sort of that team effort where everyone's sort of, working at this highest level of their scope so that you can really take advantage of all the people, all the team members in that team-based care. Any questions? questions about that? I feel like I'm talking really
Do you
fast.
think the program will expand
Too much
to more
coffee.
community health workers, or?
Yeah, you know, I think that we could potentially expand. I mean, our project is a little bit limited, we're grant funded, and if we could figure out a way to sustain funding, that would be great. We have a lot of unfunded patients at the health centers, and so there's, you know, trying to tap into funding, so Tiffany was talking about funding. If we can figure out ways to sustain the funding, then I think so, yeah. So we're hoping that we can show some good improvement, in health outcomes and cost savings through our project, which hopefully we're just starting to look at the data now. But if we can show some of those things, there might be motivation to get more community health workers out there. I'm sure.
I think the idea of in-clinic, call it a virtual home visit, where the family brought in pictures of the room.
Yeah.
That would be a fascinating approach, and kind of being able to give the family, well, here's some examples of what I just did, in here. And if they didn't want to do that, maybe having even some sample pictures of rooms that you could present. Like, here's some examples of what we've done in other homes. That might be a great way to kind of introduce the concept, make it less threatening, and then get them to let you come out.
That's a great idea, and I'm going to take notes and take that back, because I think that's true. Like, I mean, for lots of people, really, over time it becomes, like Tiffany was saying, that ability to identify those things on your own. So you can really accomplish that probably just as much in that clinic visit.
Or you might also make them feel a little more comfortable if you have these example pictures of a
Right.
trash house, or, I mean, maybe you want some more labels, so that way they don't feel as.
Your house isn't the only house.
Yeah.
Or your house actually is pretty good compared to this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good idea. We have a bunch of pictures.
yeah. We have a meeting, I have a meeting tomorrow with my community health, I'm going to talk to them about that.
So do you think, because all these clinics are working with the underserved, undocumented people, that some of the barriers is they are afraid right now being reported of where they live, being undocumented, that they are not very forthcoming to
have them visit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be, so they feel.
If it's safe.
Yeah, I think they feel
Okay.
pretty safe
All
at
right,
this
good.
clinic. It's a safe place. But I mean, I think that's always an issue, and it has been more of an issue, you know, across the clinics, just seeing people come out to access them. I think there's been issues in the last,
Okay.
people being nervous. Any other questions? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I totally understand why families would be wary of having home visits. It makes sense to me. So one thing that popped into my head when you were talking about that was, I wonder if they would allow some sort of a FaceTime or a Skype visit, if that would be less threatening, virtually.
That's a good idea.
I don't know, every family is going to have a different comfort level, but that might be a potential idea as well. So the photo idea, that they take the pictures themselves, again, that's more removed, right? So that might work as well.
Yeah, I like that. Technology, always figuring out the extent that we can use the technology that's there.
But we might
for
take the pictures only of the clean areas.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to identify.
All the steps. Anyway, any other questions about looking at implementing something like this in the clinic? Yeah.
Well, it makes me curious about what things are the worst, pieces of things in the home that you should take care of first. I mean, obviously, smoking and pets,
Yeah.
but then what, bedding, carpets, I don't know.
I don't know. Tiffany could probably talk to that better because she's so much more experienced doing the home visit.
Yeah, I would say the most common trigger I see in people's homes is dust. So carpet, bedding, that kind of stuff. And then just typically, the more clutter someone has, the more dust they're gonna have, just because it's more places for it to settle, it's harder to clean. And so I would say very rarely do you go to a home that's like absolutely worst case scenario. That's on there, but they're few and far between. So most of our discussions typically does go around dust and bedding and that kind of stuff. And you also kind of have to take into account financially where the family is. I mean, if you're going in there and being like, your whole house is carpet, you need to get rid of it, that's not realistic. but you can say, oh, you have a vacuum, why don't you try vacuuming once a week, or.
Well, you had a picture of the mattress, I thought, oh, no, why do you make a mattress?
That's expensive.
Yeah, mattresses are expensive. That's one thing we do provide to our family are the mattress encasement. So we'll give them mattress encasement and pillow encasement, and just encourage them to clean their bedding. But yeah, good question. Yeah. I think if you do go into a home and there is a major problem, a major mold issue, a major cockroach infestation, and that's of course going to be very high priority just because of the sheer amount of it. Sometimes dealing with those bigger problems is really overwhelming to the families, or they don't have a choice. They live in a multi-unit housing complex, and the cockroaches are from the neighbor, and what do you do? And so you kind of just have to meet them where they're at and see what they have control over, what they don't have control over, and talk them through. But yeah, it's a challenge, definitely.
You do have access to help in the house, in Salt Lake.
Yeah. Yeah, we have partnerships with Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, so if there is a mold problem or a carpet that's disgusting, they can come in if the family's qualified and replace that. We also have resources with like our health department, safety and sanitation for pests and bugs and that kind of stuff too, which is always fun.
Do you go home and start thinking, scratching yourself?
I have an extra pair of clothes in my car.
Good to know.
Well, thank you. If you have other questions, we can follow up again later. Or is there another pressing one?
I'm done.
I have a question, it's not pressing, but I'm gonna use this opportunity, so I'll ask, I think it's Tiffany who probably answers this. This is a very personal question, and I think it might be relevant or not, and I apologize if it's not. So, we have neighbors who've moved in the last year who smoke, and they smoke in their garage, which I find really fascinating. If they don't want to smoke in their house, and I think they also smoke outside as well, but basically anytime we go out of our home, we smell it. And they are smoking right near where all of our bedroom windows are. So it's a real problem. We use a swamp cooler, so it sucks that in. So I can't open my windows. I can't. We talked with them about it. I think they smoke more as a result.
Oh, no.
So it's been on my mind, and I just haven't really known what to do. And I don't know that there is anything to do, but I find it really interesting that there are initiatives like the whole University of Utah is going smoke-free. How can neighborhoods go smoke-free? How can homeowners ask that the air that surrounds them be smoke-free?
Yes, so neighborhoods are a big challenge that way just because it's privately owned property, and so you can't control people what they do on their property. The only way they're able to formally do that is if it's a housing complex and they've decided to go smoke-free, the management. But as far as neighborhoods, that's a really big issue that we see a ton, and it's the same in my neighborhood. Swamp cooler, smokers, our house smells like smoke and it's gross. And there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can complain to the health department, but they can't do anything. They really can't reinforce anything just because it's private property. The only way that you can sometimes, depending on who you work with, you can do an ADA complaint, American with Disabilities, because respiratory issues like asthma are considered a disability. And if someone is interfering with that, it can work out that way, but to be honest, there's not a whole lot, which is really discouraging and frustrating.
Losing in the cookies.
Yeah, that's baking cookies for them.
In the cookies.
Keep dropping quit lines cards on their door.
So then I will just ask, because we don't have any significant respiratory issues yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we do have, I mean, my son has allergies and I have exercise-induced asthma, so I suppose I could go down that road. But what about air filters within the house? I mean, that's the other thing that I'm, was that like a room, in-room,
Yeah, so the mobile air filtration units are really good for that kind of stuff.
okay.
As far as like a furnace filter, it won't do much, especially if you're using a swamp cooler in the summer. It will do virtually nothing.
But in each room, I can do something.
Yes, definitely.
And then present them with the bill.
They're actually pretty cheap. A mobile air filtration unit is around $100, and they cost about the same as a light bulb to run. So, they're pretty cheap, which is good.
Okay.
Sorry, Candace.
What resources we have here. Okay, with that, I think we're back to Brittany now, who's going to talk a little bit more about NEEF. I just like that acronym.
I know, and I have to remember what it stands for, so I'm going to say now, National Environment Education Foundation. But also, if you want to stand or get some more breakfast, please help yourself. We are almost done. I promise it won't take too long. But just in connection with what we've been talking about today, there are a few other resources that you can consider talking about with your providers and your care team to maybe include it as part of your workflow. And we kind of touched on a lot of them already, but two of them, that's special. The Asthma Self-Managed Education in the clinic, and then underneath this is environmental assessment in the clinic, and that comes in with the National Environment Education Foundation. So as far as asthma self-management education in the clinic, I think STAR talks really well about something that they're trying with the community health workers as they're adapting the home visit program, taking that first visit and focusing on it in the clinic rather than trying to get into the home right then. There's also a group in New York, and this is their picture, that is called the New York Urban Health Plan, and they have been doing self-management education in the clinic for years. They actually have a couple clinics as part of the project, and they have a really high burden of asthma with their patients. So this is something that makes a lot of sense for them to focus on. It might not make sense in your clinic, but if you feel like you have a high enough burden of asthma that is uncontrolled and that could use additional resources, this could be something that you could think about implementing into your clinic or taking parts of it that work. Or it sounds like Willow Creek is also kind of doing parts of this already. And so you might already be doing very similar things, but I just want to share a little bit of this model. So these are some of the high-level effective components of their program. So the first thing that they mentioned is that the goal of this is to reduce the workload of the providers and share it among your team. So they have a health educator on staff at each of the clinics, which again might be beyond what we're able to do in clinics here with the type of funding or the type of just how you're staffing your clinics. But they have a health educator on staff, and then they use the health educator, the administrative staff, the provider, and nurses all as part of this process, so that it's not just the provider providing that additional education. They built it into the workflow, which we kind of talked about a little bit with some of the other examples, and I'll show you what their workflow looks like so you can get an idea of how they do that. And they also made it part of the expectation for patients. The patient knows if they're coming in for an asthma visit, or if they have a history of asthma, they're going to visit with the health educator at some point. And so they're expecting to stay at the clinic longer than the 10 or 15 minute visit with the provider, which is critical because, if the patient doesn't want to stay, they're not going to stay. So this makes it part of their expectation. Also, they emphasize the warm handoff between the provider to the health educator to help emphasize the importance of additional education on asthma and having an asthma champion in the clinic. So someone who is going to take the role of the asthma expert, the asthma, and not an enforcer per se, but the person who finds value in this and is going to help structure what needs to be talked about, what trainings need to happen, and what's going to be part of the actual conversation between the health educator and the patient. So in New York, this is what they look like. So the MA greets the patient with a history of asthma and has them fill out this asthma control test question as they're waiting in the clinic office. And then the MA inputs those answers into their EHR. When it's the turn of the patient to see the provider, they go in, and the provider, as part of the visit, double-checks the asthma control test questions that are entered into the EHR and uses that as part of their visit. So whether or not they have controlled asthma is part of the conversation. And then the provider warm hands off the patient to the health educator, who provides about 15 to 20 minutes of education. And it can include these types of things. So if it's a new diagnosis, they can take more time to talk about that. And it sounds like you already do that, which is really awesome. They talk about their specific triggers, talk about medication, do the teach back with the inhaler techniques. So right then and there, you can double check inhaler techniques. And in New York, the health educator writes up an asthma action plan, so it's no longer on the provider. But we've talked about it here, and it really is the provider's responsibility here to build the action plan, so that doesn't really work here. But that's how New York does it. And then as needed, they'll refer them to additional services, or and then they'll put all the notes from the visit into the EHR. So it's all kept track of. You can reference what happened, where the patient is. It's just this nice, neat little workflow. So we talked with them, and some of the key components that I've already kind of touched on, but that team-based care approach is really critical. Also, this model allows for emphasis of the asthma action plan. We know that's a weakness in a lot of clinics. It's hard to really emphasize the importance or usefulness of it, but in this model, the health educator is able to use that action plan to help them really see why it's useful. They include a lot of trainings for their health educators to make sure that they're doing the type of education that the provider would feel comfortable with, or that the team would feel comfortable with. And then they do a lot of data collection to show success. And the type of data they collect is a little, so they collect ED visits just from the past. I don't actually know what their time frame is, but they collect ED visits from the patient, they collect hospitalization visits. They have a goal of 10 symptom-free days that they collect from the patients every time they come in to see, how many days in the last 10 days were you symptom-free, trying to increase that. I know, it seems like a lot, but it's nice that they collect some kind of data to show that it's effective. So that's New York. And then one of the trainings that has come out recently that could be beneficial is this Breathe Well, Live Well educator training. Have any of you heard of this? It's relatively new. Yeah, it's from the American Lung Association. It's free, it's online, it's very convenient, and it helps prepare educators, and they specifically talk about healthcare practitioners, certified educators, CHES or health educators, community health workers. I believe healthcare practitioners, in fact, includes anyone in your team at the clinic could benefit from this education. And it helps them know the basics of asthma and how to deliver asthma SME to adults and families. And again, it's relatively new, but it seems promising, especially since it's flexible and how you would go through it. So this is just a brief overview of the modules and where you can learn more about it. Breathe Well at lung.org. We don't have an American Lung Association office in Utah, but I'm going to figure out where we could get those things so that we can take advantage of this if it's useful. And what I like about it is they have the prerequisite, the American Lung Association Asthma Basics 101 course, which has been around for a little while, and that's also free online. So really good training that you can consider as part of, even if you don't want to do a full self-management education program in your clinic, maybe you can do some parts of this model, or at least go through the training, have one person be your designated asthma person. Anyways, ideas for what you could possibly use in your clinic is all this is. And then NEAF, back to NEAF, they provide different tools and resources for providers around environmental trigger assessment. And I want to focus primarily on this part. This is just a screenshot of their website. But they provide, in this asthma environmental history form, they put together a little 2-sheet paper that the provider, so if you don't feel like referring to a full, 3-visit program outside of the clinic is going to work for every patient, or if the other options aren't good, you could at least consider building into your visits with your asthma patients some sort of environmental trigger assessment component. So that's what this form is. It's very simple. It just helps the provider go through and ask about the different triggers the patient might be experiencing and have suggestions for what they can do to remediate the triggers. Very simple little page. So something you look into, see if it fits. I think I'm personally more of a proponent of sending your uncontrolled patients to the home visit program. I mean, the referral is free, so it's a pretty easy thing. But this is just another resource you can think about. So that is really all that we have, and we actually took all the time, which I'm surprised that we did. So do you have any other questions for any of the presenters or the programs? Anything that you want to talk about? You can obviously, you can reach out to us personally. We have all of our contact information on here. Gabby really likes midnight calls, so we'll add her cell phone later. But any lingering questions, you're
just make a few comments.
Yeah, comment away.
I would be mean if I didn't do this.
Yeah.
Family engagement. I think, I love all this. I just spoke on the last webinar for family engagement, talking about, getting more compliance. I hate that word, but compliance from families that they are in the beginning of developing that action care plan. And realizing that some of the triggers are also some of the things that are, very important to them, like pets are a part of their families. And like me, Fix Up, where, it was immediately put the pet that's outside, and that doesn't fly well with a lot of our community because they're also support dogs, they're emotional. So I think, just being, cognitive of that each family is their own culture, and just vacuuming may be the very thing that breaks that family because they have so much going on that they're, so to always kind of be looking at those other creative resources. And I think, even Mindy, from what you've said, being a former smoker, thinking about that, I went out in the garage because I thought I was not exposing my neighbors to it, or, of course, my household. And yes, a very, very bad habit that, I'm proud to say it's been 15 years, but I did. So it's those things that it makes me really angry that I would have been so embarrassed when it told me that you smell it in your house. So, but again, the cultures in trying to come at families or individuals without, because I immediately almost felt like, less than, in how you present. So there's always going to be somebody in an audience that is that person that you're talking about. So I would just be very careful of how, if we really want to reduce, the ER visits and such is really, and I love how you put it, meeting the family where they're at instead of because it's judgmental. I mean, it's hard. It is judgmental, and we know to get to that certain place for health and ultimate health. But I think just always understanding that there's always a story behind every single family of why they're where they're at.
And that's why motivation interviewing skills are so important, specifically for Tiffany, who goes out in the homes and is doing an awesome job because she knows, like the pet situation, that it's not doable for some of the people because the pet is more important. It's very important part of the life.
Could be life-saving.
It's life-saving, yes, right. And so recognizing that, it's very good.
Yeah, really good point. I do not envy the role of Tiffany and Andrea and the community health workers because of how difficult that is to really help people without a judgment line. I mean, it's hard when you're saying, so I think your approach of letting them lead that conversation is also really key. Mm-hmm. So that's a good point.
And I also think if you have one that was maybe your hardest and they really come a long way, ask them if they'd be willing to be a peer, and have them help kind of develop the language even going in. And that
would be good. Yeah.
That would be really good.
Up here. Yeah, you should look into that one. Yeah.
I like that idea a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, we actually are finding sober. I'm so sorry.
What's that?
Oh, you're okay.
You're okay.
All right.
All right.
So also Mindy Jade said, great work, Tiffany, Brittany, Star, and Gabby. She already told you that. Presentation was excellent. I can tell you're really making a difference for these families, so.
So
Thanks, Jade.
would like to ask, as a follow-up to that, should we do another motivational interviewing meeting? I wonder if we should try and think about that. The last one sort of happened organically. I don't think I would have that opportunity to, again, but maybe we can look into what resources we could have, and maybe that's a meeting that we could plan down the road a little ways. Maybe it would be more of a learning session versus but yeah, it's so key, right? And those skills help in so many conversations with families, not just
Beth says yes, please.
Yes, please. Wonderful,
I think it
wonderful.
will be good, yeah.
All right, well, so our next meeting is on November 15th. We hope that that is early enough in the month that we won't have too many folks out of town as the holidays approach. And so we will have some information about, did I get that acronym right? I just did it off the top of my head, BPS. Yay! And lead level screening opportunities. And I think that's it. So we'll let you guys get on your way and be on with your day. And thanks for joining us.